experienced my first carnival and it was all fun. I skipped the after party because I'm saving it for next year. But I know, stranger, you're not here because you want to hear about that. You're here because, well, it's almost midnight and the thoughts are running again. Because you know what? Whatever you're feeling, that could have been love. It could have been something real. As the night gets quiet and the distractions of our daytime finally fade away, these are the ghosts that come back to pull up a chair and stare us in the eyes. We fall into these endless, agonizing loops of speculations. For some of us, we are lying awake wondering if an ex or your situationship is sitting in the dark, feeling the same exact weight we are, wondering if they truly deeply regret the very last words they spoke to us before everything fell apart. But for some of us tonight, we're not mourning a past relationship because you are currently in one. Yet you're dealing with a monster that has green eyes. You might be lying in bed right now, looking at the person beside you, or maybe looking at your phone, trying to decode a text message from them, agonizing over the distance, however that may sound to you. Either way, you are driving yourself crazy, trying to figure out what they are actually feeling, what they are into, or if someone is catching their attention right now, or when you're not around. Whether your heart is broken from a separation or it's slowly being eaten away by the silent, twisting anxiety of jealousy, the truth is, and it's really painful, the cold, absolute truth of the matter is the same. We do not know what they are thinking about. On most days, if we are being completely honest with ourselves, we already are too confused by what we feel to accurately decode somebody else. When fear takes over, everything becomes a blur. It's just really hard to see, really hard to feel, and just really hard to know what to do. So, stranger, if you've come back to this quiet room tonight, I really appreciate you. Thank you for letting me spend this midnight space with you. But for now, let's take a deep breath and figure out how to step off the emotional tightrope. This is the Midnight Affair. My name is Lee. It's nighttime again. And whether you are navigating the aftermath of a breakup or trying to hold on to a relationship, we all tend to do something incredibly human, but also very exhausting. We try to guard a perimeter that does not belong to us. Think about where your mental energy has gone today. If you're just coming out of a breakup, you're probably checking their online status, replaying old conversations, and trying to manage what their friends think of you. If you are in a relationship, the loop is just as draining. You find yourself obsessively checking who they are following, whose photos they are liking, or trying to parse the exact tone of a text message. Either way, you become a detective in your own life, constantly trying to figure out what the other person is secretly into, if they even have secrets for you, what they are feeling, or if their mind is wandering elsewhere. We pull ourselves out of our own peace and step into a hyper vigilant state of policing them. Funny enough, we call it love or protection, but the real name for it is jealousy. It is an internal panic that tells us that if we just watch them closely enough, we can prevent ourselves from getting hurt. We act like soldiers defending a border, completely blind to the fact that we have absolutely no jurisdiction over that territory. I know exactly how exhausting Border Patrol is because for a long time, the detective in me simply could not be silent. I tried so hard to understand the patterns of my previous relationships. No matter how much I read about the brain, update myself on behavioral sciences, or tried to dissect human behavior patterns in linguistics and body language, I only ever scratched the surface. And most of the time, I just ended up creating elaborate excuses for them. Worst of all, I would end up convincing myself that they were, quote unquote, the one. After all, it seems like that is supposed to be a big part of our human story, right? I learned everything the hard way. I learned that the hard way. I learned that trying to manufacture an explanation for someone else's action is worse than sketching them. I was just trapping myself, getting more and more attached to them every single time I thought I picked up a new pattern. Most of the time, I ended up completely wrong anyway. I am always afraid of what I don't know. So, my first line of defense is to study it. And in all that studying and overthinking, my brain has started going to dark, heavy places where it should have never gone. Instead of loving them the way I could and making beautiful memories, I ended up being destructive. I wasn't choosing them, and I wasn't choosing the relationship. I was choosing my own desperate need to control. I was choosing myself, but for all the wrong reasons. I know what this sounds like. It sounds like I am blaming myself. Truth be told, for a long time, I really did. Yeah, I blamed myself until I finally learned my lesson. And that's the raw truth I am sharing with you tonight, stranger. Those people, they did not do well for themselves. If I look back at it now from a different perspective, some of them just ignored the problems. And a handful of them were just flat out terrified of the monster I was becoming. The reality was, until now, no one had ever really held my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, I am with you in this relationship through and through. Until somebody did. He held my hand. And I never thought that it could happen until it happened. So there were breakups that hurt for days and months. There were breakups where hope lingered for far too long until it eventually went stale. A strange thing happens when you finally stop trying to police the dark. You begin to evolve. Every single time I evolve into someone better, the farther away my feelings become for that past person. Not because I never loved them. I did. I just love myself a little better each time. In this newfound love I have for myself, whatever transpired in those old relationships and whoever we used to be back then, that is simply not the kind of love I am willing to give or take in a romantic relationship ever again. Personally, I don't look back at past relationships to consider them for my future. I always think if it did not work for us then, I don't see how it will work for us now. I have evolved, and I really do hope they did too. You know what's stranger? Funny thing is, I think when a lot of people see the title of this podcast, The Midnight Affair, they expect something a bit sexier. They think of hushed whispers, sleek romance, or something scandalous hidden away in the dark. But let's completely be honest for a second here. If you are awake right now between midnight and 3 a.m., you know the reality of this hour is not sexy at all. At 3 a.m., you are not having glamorous thoughts. You're probably staring at a blank ceiling, trying to figure out how a room can feel this loud and empty at the same time. You're having those heavy, raw thoughts that spiral downward until they pull tears right out of your eyes. You're wrestling with the kinds of anxieties that can literally make or break how you walk into work or how you look at yourself in the mirror the next day. That is why this show is called The Midnight Affair. It is an intimacy with our own raw, unedited human emotion. It's about the relationship we are forced to have with our own mind when the rest of the world is completely asleep. All our filters are stripped away, and we are left entirely with our own truth. When you're sitting there in that heavy silence at 3 a.m., you just want that bleeding to stop. I get it. You just want to breathe. Just breathe. But how do you do that? How do we step out of the panic and actually catch our breath? When we leave our thoughts to run completely wild in the dark, they get disconnected from what is real. They become frantic, headless things that spin around in our minds, tearing up our peace, making the monsters look 10 feet taller than they actually are. Eons ago, that was back in the pandemic, this podcast was called Decapitated Thoughts Demystifying Romantic Relationships. I kept that concept close to my heart tonight because of one specific word: demystifying. Demystifying a relationship isn't about being cold or detached. It's about turning on a small bedside lamp so you can see that the shadow on the wall isn't a big monster at all. It's just really a jacket thrown over a chair. Don't get me wrong, your pain is real and it's heavy, very human. We're not going to ignore that pain tonight. Instead, we are going to strip down the phantom terror away from the unknown by anchoring onto the things you can actually reach right now. So, stranger, let's turn the light on together. From our first episode, I ask you to do something practical. I ask you to take a piece of paper and a pen and write down exactly how you gave your love away so you can figure out how to redirect that love inward. Tonight, if you still have that paper, get it and use it as a reference. Or if not, a new page can also be good. Grab your pen. Let's use it to put the boundaries back where they belong. Okay, now I'm going to give you some instructions. Try to do it on your own because you can't really see me do it on my end. Right in the middle of that blank page, I want you to draw a small circle. Now, draw a much larger circle around it, enclosing the small one. You should have an inner circle and an outer circle. This is our map for a concept called the dichotomy of control. As we established, we are looking at this with the heart. The versions of this philosophy online command you: if you can't control it, don't worry about it. But human beings don't work that way. We cannot just flip a switch in our brain and instantly stop worrying about someone we love. We're not robots. And definitely, we're not Marcus Aurelius. He was the one who wrote about Stoicism back in the Roman times. And this is pretty much a part of that. But you see, stranger, I see you. Insecurity hurts, and fear of abandonment is real. So instead of trying to be numb, let's look at your page, your paper, and physically write out where the anxiety belongs. Let's work with the outer circle first. Take your pen and write inside it. If you're healing from a breakup, these are the things that you want to write down on that outer circle. Their silence, their choices, their new life, their unchangeable absence. If you are currently in a relationship but drowning in jealousy, these are what you write in your outer circle. My partner's hidden thoughts, who they text, what they are into when I'm not around, and their ultimate loyalty. This entire outer ring is the territory where you have zero jurisdiction. It's not your business. You can love someone with everything you have, but you can never possess their mind or force them to stay. Now, look at that tiny, quiet inner circle right in the center. This is your sovereign ground. Inside this circle, these are what you write: my boundaries, my standard of respect, my response to fear, my choice of silence, my healing. This is the only territory on earth that you have a direct, unyielding right to govern. Let's look down at your paper. The diagram you just drew is a positive boundary, not a numbing agent. This page never asks you to pretend you don't care. If a wave of grief hits you because of a breakup, or if a short pang of jealousy shoots through you because of an old relationship wound, this circle doesn't tell you to erase it. In fact, it honors that pain. It simply says, let it hurt, but stop writing into the wrong circle. There is an enormous difference between feeling an emotion and feeding it. When you feel a spike of panic or jealousy, your instinct is to rush straight into the outer circle. You pick up your phone at 2 a.m., you check their location, you dig through their comment sections, or you replay old texts looking for clues. Every time you do that, you are taking your precious finite energy and throwing it into a territory you cannot control. You are invading a perimeter that isn't yours, and you are leaving your own ground completely undefended. When the panic hits, look at that paper. Trace the line of the inner circle with your finger and say, the anxiety is real, but I am staying right here. You allow yourself to feel the raw ache of insecurity without letting it dictate your behavior. You anchor yourself in your here and now. You ask the page, or you ask yourself, what do I need inside my circle right now to treat myself with dignity, regardless of what they are doing out there? Over the pandemic, there had been a lot of lessons that I've learned, and they solidified something that I felt for a very long time, and that is not to regret anything that happened in the past. I saw this beautiful TED talk by the late brilliant Emily Levine called How I Made Friends with Reality. She recorded it toward the very end of her life. And in it, she talks about how we live in a culture that absolutely hates limits. We view limits as a penalty, a failure, or a prison sentence. She argues that making friends with reality, truly accepting your limits, is always the foundational first step to peace. Not because you are giving up, and not because of passive resignation, but because you cannot interact with, you cannot dance with, and you cannot heal from a reality that you refuse to acknowledge. Look back down at the paper in front of you. Look at that outer circle. When you accept that the outer circle belongs entirely to the universe, to them, or to the storm, you're not waving a white flag of defeat. You're making friends with reality. You're looking at that boundary of what you cannot control and saying, this is what is. This is the truth of my present moment. Instead of fighting the wind, you turn your attention to your inner circle because that is where your shape is. That is where your life actually happens. The storm outside is going to rage. People are going to do what they do. You cannot command the clouds to clear, and you cannot force another human being to show up as a whole transparent partner if they're not ready. It reminds me of a famous moment in Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist. There's a scene where the young boy Santiago is faced with the seemingly impossible task of turning himself into the wind. If you haven't read it, don't worry. The real beauty of that moment isn't some magical trick. The beauty is that he doesn't stand there trying to conquer the horizon or shouting orders to the sky to force the air to bend to his will. He doesn't try to command or master the storm. Instead, he just steps into it. He listens to it. He connects with it until he realizes that he and the storm are part of the same exact universe. He didn't fight the wind to change its direction. He became one with it, letting it roar all around him while his center remained completely untouched. Coelho wrote that the wind is a free spirit with no birthplace and no place to die. You cannot cage it and you cannot force it to blow in your direction. You certainly cannot force another human being's heart to stay if it wants to wander. The secret is you don't need to possess the power to control or stop the storm outside in order to keep your feet firmly planted on the ground. You don't need to conquer the wind to survive it. You just have to let it blow past you while you stay safely inside your own skin and tell your own story. That is the profound shift from desperation to dignity. Dignity doesn't talk out loud. It doesn't need to recite a polished mantra in the mirror to convince itself that it's okay. It's just a quiet settling in your chest. It's that exact moment at 3 a.m. when your shoulders finally drop, your hands unclench from your phone, and you take a deep, clear breath because you finally stop carrying a weight that doesn't belong to you. It's the simple, steady realization that you can love them completely, but you are choosing to stay inside your own borders tonight. Let that outer circle belong to them, stranger. Your ground is right here, and your garden is with you. Thank you for spending this time with me, stranger. I hope you keep safe. Sweet dreams. My name is Lee. This is the Midnight Affair. Good night, stranger.